Tell us about what do you remember about that long TD catch in the Super Bowl?
I was tired after I ran that far, 85 yards. uh, but no, it was obviously a very, impactful moment in the game. It has been, a very impactful play and event in my life, and we'll never forget it. Playing in a game like the Super Bowl, that's something that you dream about as a kid. Starting way back from probably elementary school when you're roughhousing on the couch and your mom's yelling at you, right? To actually setting a record in that game and having to stand for, at least a decade or more now, it's quite an accomplishment I'm proud of.
Terrific. Tell us about growing up in Lansing, Michigan, being an athlete, and then heading off to Michigan State.
Very small town. My entire high school was probably less than the freshman class school today at Myers Park High School. But learned quite a bit in the area of core values and core fundamentals. Being in that small, tight knit community, having a group of athletes that, back in the day, Mike, you probably can relate to this, but we traveled from sport to sport to sport. And there was a group of guys that just kind of did all of that and helped us develop a lot of different skill sets, but had a lot of fun. I mean, it was, like I said, small town kind of living, but we had big city development. We had, as far as athletic ability, we had guys like, Magic Johnson was from my hometown. Guys that went on to have great careers that were influences of ours. So it was good.
Outstanding. When you were in high school and college and not knowing whether you were going to have a professional sports career, what were you preparing to do?
That's a good question. I think I'm probably like a lot of high school students today. So, guys, if you're listening to this or you're watching this broadcast, don't panic. I don't think you have to have all the answers today. And hopefully, we'll walk through some of the things that you can do to prepare if you don't know exactly what you want to be. Because, Mike, I was one of those kids. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do or what I wanted to be. But we'll talk about that, throughout the interview today. It was a whole compilation of different experiences that led me to what I do today.
Okay, terrific.
But
Let's
to answer your question, I had no idea in high school what I wanted to be at that time
That's
at
terrific.
all.
I hear that a lot from
Yeah.
my own daughters. They say they don't know what they want to do. I say you don't have to decide today. So as
Mhm.
you kind of went through your journey, how did you make a decision about what you wanted to do professionally, and how did you prepare?
It was interesting. Obviously everyone knows by now, if you're watching this broadcast, that I wound up being a professional athlete. As a part of that, you make a lot of money, you get to travel and be a part of a very competitive environment. One of the things that I value is education. I continued to learn even after I was drafted about investments, how to manage my own portfolio, and also really got into operating companies and things like that. And that's sort of that was the introduction that led me to where I am today. Was first of all just learning how to understand what I had in my own possession and how to manage that, and then it crafting a strategy to do it on a larger scale, with a larger platform, with more capital.
What kind of skills did you develop that, if you look back, that you wish you had really developed in high school?
Yeah, good question. I would say, it's always important, Mike, to have, sort of technical skills, right? Learning how to write different styles, right? Formal and everything in regards to that. Reading, obviously, developing skills to read at different types of reading. I think that setting those technical skills aside, Communication is so important. And in an era where technology has sort of divided people and allowed them to be distant, right? Those interpersonal skills, how to communicate, how to really listen, right? With the intent of understanding what message is being delivered as opposed to listening with how am I going to respond to what someone just said, right? But really becoming a really good listener, those interpersonal skills and communication, I think are critical. I think the other thing too is, in this day and age, having some exposure to programming and technology is critical. In addition to that, I would also say that, believe it or not, history, right? Because I think that when you don't understand what's happened in the past, you tend to make the same mistakes in the future, right? And so I think as high school students, as you think about what do I need today? What do I need to develop today? I think that would be a good place to start.
Outstanding. The other question I had for you today, it's a very competitive work environment out there. What would you recommend students do to separate themselves from the crowd for today's work environment?
Yeah, I would say, Mike, being a leader is important. I think anything that you can do to demonstrate leadership skills, whether that is, sort of taking an initiative on something. Hey, here's what I did. And I can articulate that to someone I'm either interviewing with for college or job is the initiative of doing this. I organized this, and I don't care if it was something very minimal or something on a very large scale that was impactful. But I think being able to demonstrate where you took an initiative, either in a social club, a school club, sports team, I think will separate you. So those sort of leadership skills, interpersonal skills, I think are important. And then obviously the merits that you have on your academic, progress reports and being able to be involved in certain clubs and things like that. It goes beyond just saying that you're a smart person.
Yeah, how important is it to you to get a college degree? And how important do you think it is for students today? There's some controversy about that.
Well, there's a lot of sort of misunderstanding about the importance of that paper. And I think a lot of students, and I'll say this too, Mike, myself included, when I was in high school, I think I fostered this whole mentality of like, when am I ever going to use this stuff again, right? Like, when do I ever need this? But surprisingly enough, you do wind up using a lot of what you learned in high school and skill sets, that foundation, you wind up using those skills again. And I'll give you a perfect example of why grades are important and school is important. And not just the material, but the grades itself, right? Because I think what it does is it demonstrates the ability to take a set of facts and information, understand that, right? Develop some skill sets of how you learn that, right? And then either test on it or develop a paper or some kind of presentation around what you learned. That skill set of here's a project and here's how I completed it, and how I did on it is my grade, the representation of my work. That skill set, Mike, translates to almost every single professional situation that a kid wants to be into. I don't care if you're going to run your own business. I don't care if you're going to wash cars one day, right? But developing that skill set of how to start a process and then complete a process is one of the most basic fundamental things that we look at as employers of, how does someone do in school and what did they learn when they were there?
That's a great point. Why is a lifetime of learning so important?
Good question. Well, I'll start with this, that you never stop learning, right? I think a lot of people kind of scratch their head. They say, Moose, you went to school for, journalism, telecommunications. You were a professional athlete for 14 years. How did you get into the investment world and managing a private equity firm? Well, my education didn't stop after college, right? And it continued. And a lot of what I learned were things that I learned on my own or things that I learned through experiences in life, right? So, set aside a high school or college education. What can I do to further my knowledge base on a daily basis, and continue to learn? And I've got a partner who's well into his, older age, 50s, 60s years, 60 years old, and he learns every day, and he talks about things that he reads and all these different things every single day. And so you never stop learning. And I think if you want to continue to grow, it has to be a component of your personality.
All right, terrific. The other question I had for you was, we all have a lot of mentors and people that influenced us during our lives. Talk about some of the people during your formative years that were very influential for you.
Yeah, yeah, good question. I watched when I was a kid, I watched a lot of sort of Jerry Rice, Walter Payton, how hard they worked, how dedicated they were. I had direct examples in my, in my front yard, so to speak, with like Magic Johnson, John Smoltz. He's was a pitcher for the Atlanta Braves for most of his career. Hall of Fame kind of guy here, and he went to my high school. He was my middle school basketball coach. I got to see firsthand a pathway that people went from high school to being a professional athlete. It was right in my neighborhood there. So Magic was a big influence on me. Guys like John Smoltz. I had business mentors once I got out of college and into the NFL. But there was another guy, Dr. Gunnings, was a professor of mine at Michigan State, and really helped me develop good study skills, study habits, learn how to ask good questions, and seek to understand. And so there was this sort of nucleus or core group of people that I kind of took a little bit of this, a little bit of that from in my early years. And then obviously, once I got to the NFL, that expanded, and I was blessed. Let me tell you, Mike, I had a position coach. His name was Richard Williamson, and God rest his soul, he passed away. But Richard Williamson was one of the toughest coaches I played for Richard Williamson for 7 years before he said, "Good job." I was coming back from my first Pro Bowl appearance before he told me that I played well. So that can kind of give you an idea of the type of attention to detail and how hard of a coach he was, how hard he pushed me, because he wanted me to be great. He pushed me very hard.
Sounds like Richard may have been related to Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
You've played on teams all of your life, and now you work on a team. How important is teamwork in everything that we do?
Yeah, it is critical. And I think, I talked about that earlier with interpersonal skills, right? What can you develop at a young age in those formative years that helps you later on in life? And I think those interpersonal skills help you be a better teammate. And one of the key things about a team in general is that everyone has to know their role on a team, right? And the minute that I don't respect your role, and you don't respect my role, or I try to do your job or you try to do my job, the concept of what the team was put together for is lost, right? So I think understanding what is my role on this team, and do I accept that role, right? Am I looking over my shoulder trying to be the person next to me and do his job or her job? So understanding what your role is, right? And being the best you can be for the team of what the team needs you, right? Is critical of being a teammate, right? And fulfilling that. And then guess what? Be a leader in your role, right? Motivate people the right way. If you see a teammate that's not doing something right, grab them. Show them how to be great, right? And don't be afraid to share your success, because when you teach your teammates and you show your teammates how to be successful, it makes the whole team better, right? There's a competition within that team, but then you got to know that you guys are still wearing the same jersey.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Shifting gears to athletics a little bit, you've got 6 kids. Your son, Muhsin Muhammad III, is headed to Texas A&M as a receiver, and hopefully we'll see him on the field soon. But during these times, and during any time really, what advice do you have for high school athletes about the recruiting process and the way that they can make an impression on a coach? Because you told me you had another son that's running track, and so it's a little bit harder to be recruited in a sport like that.
Yeah. Well, they want to get you on campus. They want to wine and dine you a little bit, and obviously we can't do that right now in the recruiting process. Just like all of our lives have been disrupted right now. I think to the extent that you can continue to build on your core fundamental character traits. And what I mean by that is, do you work hard? Are you self-motivated? Are you getting up every day? Are you working hard, right? Are you studying your sport and working hard to achieve goals that you set for yourself? And I'm not talking about the big lofty goals. I want to go play for, Chapel Hill one day, or Alabama one day, or one of these other schools one day. That's a big lofty goal. What have you set your goals for yourself on a daily basis, right? Right. Like today, when I wake up, I want to make sure that I never miss a rep in the weight room. I never miss a sprint. I'll go 100% in everything that I do. Matter of fact, I want to squeeze maybe an extra rep out on everything that I plan for myself today. All right. I want to make sure that I study certain things, because there's different components to what we do. It's not always about the physical. It's also developing your mind, and then also nutrition and how are you taking care of your body. And so as you think about all those things, how much of that can you communicate with your recruiter or with the coach in college that's recruiting you, right? You want to make sure that you have a criteria built out. What is important to you? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to do in college, right? And make sure that that criteria aligns with the university that is seeking after you, right? And if you don't have that before recruiting process starts, you will get lost, and you will be able to, recruiters will sell you. It'll be very difficult to sift through all of the noise to understand what's important to you. And you may get lost up and get caught up and lost in something that's totally irrelevant to what you need to be successful. So I guess, Mike, that's a long-winded answer to say, everything is different right now. And the more you can communicate to your recruiter why you're better than the next person and really be able to demonstrate that, I think it will help you out in that process.
Awesome, awesome. Students, this series is for you. If you have a question for Moose, put it in the chat on the YouTube channel, and we'll try to answer it for you. Shifting on to football a little further, what was your favorite memory of playing for the Panthers all those years?
Oh, gosh. I would say one of my favorite all-time memories was probably winning the NFC Championship game was a huge, just kind of big memory for me. Signing day was a huge memory. Sitting in my living room and having the Panthers pick me, and not knowing that I was actually going to get picked by them. I had no clue, and didn't really know even where Charlotte, North Carolina was at the time. Those were all big moments for me. Obviously, retiring was a massive moment for me, but there were so many great games in between, sort of 1996 and 2010 when I retired. So many memories. I think, obviously playoffs, we had a huge win against the Rams in double overtime. Big win up in Philly, NFC Championship game, and all those games were big games for me. I would say the most memorable game for me was probably my first really 100-yard game against the Saints my first year, and I did it in a half. And it was, I had like 96 yards in a half, and I'll never forget. yeah, I remember every single catch.
That's awesome. We know Jake Delhomme liked to throw the long ball. In Philadelphia in 2004 is still very memorable to all of us. So, talk about the coaches in you played for Nick Saban for a couple of years at the beginning of his coaching career.
hmm
At that time, could you see the potential for him to be as wildly successful as he is now? And what were those qualities that you did see?
Yeah, I'll say this, that when I played for Nick, I didn't see the greatness in Nick, but I'm not surprised, if that makes sense, right? Um, Nick was a stickler for detail, which my position coach, once I got to the NFL, was probably a little bit more than Nick was a stickler for detail. Um, Nick was big on the whole Belichick, do your job, approach to work. And not surprising that they both coached together at Cleveland before, Nick came to Michigan State, and obviously Bill Belichick went on to the Patriots. But Nick was he was very hard. I think Nick had a set of expectations, and he expected you to do your job to the best of your ability every single day, even when you were tired, even when you weren't motivated in the face of adversity. And for those who meet that standard, I think they found it with Nick or play for Nick. And those of us who really embrace that part of Nick, I think excelled underneath his leadership. And if you have enough people who are like that, is I think the reason why Nick has been able to win as many championships, because he's been able to identify, the characteristics of successful people and successful young men and bring them all together and then just lead them the way that he's done his whole career. He was a great influence on me as well.
Outstanding. Well, we made a call for questions and we got some questions. So Drummer Boy wants to know, what is the best way to get better at running routes?
I don't think there's any sort of mysteries or some secret sauce. The only, they say the mother of learning is repetition, right? And so the only way you get better is to do it over and over and over again. I think film study is critical to improving any part of what you want to do on the football field. And so to be able to see yourself run those routes, see yourself running those routes, and then being honest with yourself and critiquing yourself, right? And then having someone who is maybe at a level above you to mentor you, to give you those coaching points and take them to heart, right? I think coaching criticism, if used properly, can really, really benefit an athlete's growth. If taken the wrong way, coaching criticism can destroy an athlete's confidence. And so it's about the character of the person and how you want to accept that guidance and that leadership. That is going to be the biggest contribution to your growth, in addition to repetition. But how do you receive your coaching? And that, to me, is the key to growth for people, is how do I think about what people are telling me?
Okay, great answer. Jasper Salary asks, what are some of the best ways to get around someone without getting a flag?
I think, working the line of scrimmage it was one of the keys to my success as a player. I spent a lot of time in college and in the NFL working on my skill sets without the football. Obviously, play wide receiver. Your job is to catch the football. I mean, at the end of the day, you can run great routes. You can have great releases. If you don't catch the ball, you're going to be on the sideline with the coaches watching the game, right? But I'll tell you this, that, there's so many other parts of the game that are just as important as catching the football. And that line of scrimmage, if you can't win there, it's hard to win in this game. And so one of the things that we did, we had a martial arts expert come in a few years, right? And really teach us how to use our hands, right? How to really use our hands at the line of scrimmage and see when that defender wants to put his hands on you, how do you counter that? So, jujitsu is the locking of the joints. I did some training around jujitsu. I did some training around judo and learning how to use people's body weight against them. So I get you leaning. How do I use your body weight against you, right? So martial arts played a point in that. I had boxing training when I was younger, so really having quick hands and knowing how to use my quick hands. And then lateral movement, cone drills, and really being able to move as fast laterally as you do vertically, right? And practicing on that. But it's easier explained than probably done, but that'll at least give you a start.
Okay. Austin Franks wants to know, what was your mindset going into competition? Were you nervous in the moment? And if so, how did you suppress those feelings?
That's interesting. I would say for the first few years of my career, the first 2 or 3, I was nervous. I hired a sports psychologist when I was in my second year. The one thing I always wanted to do was continue to reinvest back in myself. So I went to a sports psychologist. I learned really how to develop a different set of skill sets beyond just playing on the football field. And what I mean by that is visualization and other skill sets around goal setting and really preparing my mind. And so, I talked about visualization being one of those skill sets. So visualization, to me, it released any kind of tension because I felt like I had played the game already in my mind. And when I got to the football field, it was so familiar to me because of my my visualization and my meditation skills that I had developed. And so that came through an investment through sports psychology. And I would tell you, for most of my career, I was not nervous. I was extremely ready to play. Over anxious, maybe anxiety around, let's just get it started right now, because I want a piece of this guy I'm getting ready to line up next. I've been thinking about him for the last week, and I really want to play against this guy. I developed that, like I said, through my training.
That's an awesome answer. I think preparation for anything, if you feel prepared, you won't be nervous.
That's right.
That's where you have to put in the hard work on preparation. I've always thought that.
Absolutely.
Desmond Mack wants to know, what pushed you on your journey through high school, college, and even up to the NFL?
Good question. I often get my motivation, and Mike, I tell you, this is probably one thing I hold close to my heart, but the fear of failure. I don't take failure very well, right? And so I think because of that, I over prepare, I overwork, I take nutrition, when I played extremely weightlifting, I took everything I did extremely serious because of, I think, a fear of failure. And I think that fear of failure has motivated me in a lot of different aspects of my life.
That's awesome. Let me see, where was the other one? Oh, Nicholas Welsh wants to know, who was the best quarterback you faced and how did you study and prepare for that matchup?
Wow. Cornerback, right?
Yeah.
I would say,
secondary.
I could give you all the cliche names, the Deion Sanders, the Champ Baileys of the world. But there were 2 guys that played for the Miami Dolphins. One was Patrick Surtain, and oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the other guy's name. But that matchup, they were 1997 or 98 Miami Dolphins team led by a guy, Patrick Surtain, at corner. And matter of fact, I think his son is in college football right now. It was probably one of the tougher matchups. Every game you knew that it would be a physical battle at the line of scrimmage. There would be a battle for the ball in the air because they studied so well. I was a bigger wide receiver. And so the guys that really gave me problems were the little, small, quick guys. those were the guys that really kind of gave me problems. I didn't have problems with the bigger defensive backs, but I would say that, the little small guys are the ones that gave me problems.
Okay. Another question from April Ackles. My son will start his college football in the fall. How did you maintain your faith way of life on and off the field? I know faith is important to you.
Amen. Amen. Good question. I'll tell you what, I was blessed to be drafted to the Panthers. We had a chaplain guy named Mike Bunkley that, sort of took me under his wings and really helped develop my faith. And I had a great set of Christian mentors and guys in that locker room that were accountability partners. And so I think that's important, is that you surround yourself with those who will hold you accountable to a certain standard. And I talk about Richard Williamson and guys like Nick Saban in my life from a football standpoint. From a spiritual standpoint, I would say that, I had a locker room in Carolina full of guys who were good faith guys. In addition to that, I would say, one of the biggest influences of my life, my father-in-law, who is a scholar and, a poet and probably a little bit of everything. And also was the guy who shot me a bunch of footballs during my NFL career in the summer. But he was, in my eyes, one of the biggest influence from just role model. I married my high school sweetheart. We've been together for, over almost 30 years now. But I knew my father-in-law when I was in high school. He's been an influence in my life the whole time. And even to this day, still leading. Every day, he lives his life. And you can follow that as an example of how you want to be.
Great response. One more question for you. What's your favorite place to eat in Charlotte?
Say it again.
What's your favorite place
What's my
to eat in Charlotte?
If I said anything other than Wild Wing Cafe, man, I'd be convicting myself here, right?
So you guys know, Moose works for a capital firm that owns the Buffalo Wild Wing, or the Wild Wing cafes all over the Southeast, and also Backyard Burgers. So, which leads me to my next question. We're in an extraordinary time right now. You're in a business that has been impacted greatly by the pandemic. What advice do you have for people as we kind of emerge from this crisis, and what opportunities do you see out there?
I think there'll be a tremendous amount of opportunities for people in investing. I mean, obviously, our protection is the most important thing right now, health and safety. And I think there will be practices that we've adopted in the world, right, that hopefully continue to play themselves out. And that's, being clean, being respectful of people's spaces, obviously business practices where you feel confident in the cleanliness of where you're going to be eating, et cetera. Those things I think should survive any pandemic. From a just personal standpoint, I would say that coming out of this, continue to try to develop interpersonal skills. I mean, we're able to do sort of a, podcast deal here, your Zoom meetings and all that kind of stuff are good, but the world evolves and it runs through relationships with people. And I don't think that part of human nature is ever going to change. And hopefully we're not scared of each other. We're smart about what we do, but we're not scared to interact and be interpersonal with our fellow Americans and around the world.
That is an awesome answer. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Any parting shots, Moose?
No, I just give a shout out to the whole NOS team and putting this all together. And guys are doing a great job. I give a shout out to CMS for allowing us to be a part of this and do this. And hopefully, as we continue, our fans will continue to chime in, and hopefully you got some good takeaway from this, and we continue with this series. So a shout out to all the first-time viewers that chimed in today and continue to watch.
All right. Moose, thank you for your time this afternoon. Stay safe, my friend, and hope to see you soon.